Hello everyone, my name is Hafiz from University of Manchester. Today I would like to present my work developing DualSPHysics to solve depth integrated flow for tsunami modeling. So these are the contents of this presentation. I will start with the motivations and then formulations, challenges, test cases, and finally conclusion and future work. For the motivation, the main aim of this research is for tsunami mitigation by studying the tsunami behavior. And one of the ways of that is by modeling the tsunami so that we can do a better urban planning. For the tsunami modeling, it normally needs large and relatively flat simulation domain. So we want to use the depth integrated flow model for this. And the tsunami flow is violent and is an expansive flow and it has wet and dry problem. So we want to take the advantages of SPH method here for this matter. So we actually already have the shallow water model of SPH, which called SWE-Physics. We want to we'll try to implement the same formulation into DualSPHysics, which is already highly optimized and parallelized. For the formulations, I will start with some general assumption. So we have a bathymetry data here on the picture on the left, and on top of that we have the fluid column with the bed elevation and depth, and the fluid surface is simply B plus D, and each fluid particle has a velocity in 2D in x and y direction. And in the computation, one fluid column is represented as one SPH particle or one computation point. And in the formulation, the density is a total mass in 1 unit area instead of 1 unit volume. The momentum equation is derived from using variational formulations with Lux-Friedrichs flux formulation as a stabilization term, which leads to these equations here. And for the bed frictions, we use a Manning equation. As we use the variable smoothing length, we need to adjust the smoothing length in order to get the accurate density value. So the density is a function of smoothing length, and smoothing length is a function of the density. So we need to solve this iteratively with the Newton-Raphson method. To set up the initial particle for shallow water model using the Gen case, we only need one layer of the particle. So this is a Dambrick test case for 3D, but for 2D shallow water model, we only need one layer of the particle for boundary, for fluid, and another extra layer for bathymetry data. After we compute the depth for each particles, and then we set all the elevations in the same level, so that we only need one layer of cells for the nebulous. And these are the arrays that we need in the computation. Okay, there are some challenges in developing the code. Of course, we need the major change because it's a completely different model. There are 4 important modifications here, and the first one is variable smoothing length. So we need this needs a new array for the smoothing length, which I call it H4C. And after that, we need to modify all the calculations related to the smoothing length, which is almost everywhere. And the cell size is changed into 2 times maximum smoothing length, and the cell size is updated every time step. And this is the looks. This picture shows the one layer of cells that we need for the computation. The next challenge is the bottom particle. So in the original DualSPHysics, we only have fluid and boundary particles. But for the shallow water model, the bathymetry data is part of the boundary. And we need to create this new array to identify whether it's a normal boundary or bathymetry data. And then for the solid wall or for the dynamic boundary condition, we have modified the existing one to be working with the shallow water model. So it works very similar. The boundary particles are treated as fluid particles in the computation, but their movement is zero or predefined. The density value for the boundary is interpolated from the neighbor fluid particles using the SPH scatter formulation, or back to their original or initial value if there are no fluid around. And we can interpolate the velocity as well if it's needed, and we don't need to compute the density change. Lastly, for the iterative solver of the density, we need to create a new function here. So in the function, we need to compute the C, which is the difference between the current value of the density and the interpolated value. If the non-dimensional or relative error is less than the threshold, then we need to stop the iteration. If not, then we need to compute the new value for the density and redo the same procedure. Okay, so we compute the iterative procedure of the density before the force computations. So after that, after the calculations, we need to update the cell size, update the nebulous, and then after that we can do the force computations. Okay, there is one extra challenge here, which is the open boundary. So the existing formulation has been adapted for the shallow water model. So this is the illustration of the buffer particles that we need for the open boundary by Tafuni et al. To 2018. So there are three values that we need to impose or extrapolate it from the fluid, which is Z surface or Z surface elevation, and then the density and velocity. But for the shallow water model, we don't need this. Because when we impose the density, that means we impose the depth as well. The values for the buffer particles are extrapolated from their original position instead of at the ghost node. And then after that, we need to impose the Riemann invariant according to the local Freud number condition. And we also need to limit the buffer zone to be less than two smoothing lengths, 2 times smoothing length. Okay, the next slide is some test cases for validation. The first one is a simple 1D Dumbrick problem compared with the analytical solution, and this is the video. Okay, so this is the plot of the result after 0.8 seconds, and it agrees very well with the analytical solution in the red line, except for the very front of the wave. And we did a convergence test as well, and as you can see, the model is converging. So this is just a demonstration of a 2D Dumbrick. So as you can see, the boundary particle depth is following the fluid. Okay, the next one is still a Dumbrick with a smaller opening with an obstacle in the middle, and this is another video. Okay, so these are the a plot compared with the photos from the experiment. Okay, we also compare the measured depth at 5 different points here, and as you can see, the simulations, the SPH simulations, also agree very well with the experimental data. This is also another demonstration for the open boundary. So here we have a flow over a bump with different conditions. The first one is here. So here we can capture, finally we can capture the hydraulic jump. And the second one is the same test case with a lower depth at the downstream. And the last one is imposing depth and velocity in the inlet at the same times. And then another one is a tsunami physical model of Okushiri. We try to mimic the same setting, and this is the result of the simulation. So we impose the variable depth at the inlet on the left. Um, the code is already multi-threaded, so as you can see, as we increase the number of cores, the runtime is decreasing. Okay, for the conclusion, we have implemented the shallow water equation SPH into DualSPHysics with multi-threaded and has been tested with several test cases. And the original DBC has been modified to work with the shallow water SPH. And the advantages of the DBC remained. For example, the straightforward implementation, general shape, solid boundary, and fast computation. And the open boundary is applicable for tsunami generation. For the future work, we need a more general code for multi-zone bathymetry, and we need the tsunami wave generation from the interplate thrust fault and tsunami driven debris possibly, and last one is the GPU computation. Thank you.